We're talking about those survivors who've waited almost a year and a half trying to find answers about the fire that destroyed 1,100 Boulder County homes. Today, there were some answers after investigators delivered a report that followed thousands of tips, interviews, videos, and phone calls surrounding the Marshall Fire.
The biggest news today, prosecutors will not file any criminal charges, but the findings could open the door to a flurry of lawsuits. Here are the biggest takeaways from today's findings. The Boulder County Sheriff's Office says there were two causes of the Marshall Fire. The first started as a planned burn on the religious group 12 Tribes property 6 days before the Marshall Fire. Strong wind on December 30th kicked that fire up. Investigators say Xcel equipment likely sparked the second source. Wind fueled the flames, causing two fires to become the most destructive one in state history. The investigation did not find that an underground coal seam fire sparked the Marshall Fire. We're going to dig deeper into the report with team coverage this afternoon. Marshall Zellinger looking into Xcel's equipment and the company's response today. Katie Eastman spoke with survivors, and Kevin Vaughn starts our coverage looking at how this whole thing started. Kevin?
Tom, property owned by a religious group was the focus of this investigation from its first moments, and today we learned a lot more about what happened there. Colorado's most destructive wildfire roared across Boulder County on December 30th, 2021. But its origin actually occurred 6 days earlier in this pile of burning tree branches and wood.
This is going to be a controlled burn for about the next 2 hours.
That fire was set by residents living on property owned by 12 Tribes, a religious group, and it got the okay of firefighters that day.
Given that there was the large water source on the property and the plan to cover the coals with dirt, the fire department believed the fire was being conducted responsibly. The remnants of the fire were covered with dirt at about 5 p.m.
But what Sheriff Curtis Johnson now knows is that wasn't good enough.
Under the right conditions, smoldering combustion can occur for weeks or even months when buried.
When hurricane-force winds came along, they uncovered the embers and ignited the first of two fires that merged, going on to destroy more than 1,000 homes and killing 2 people.
At the time the fire was set on December 24th, it was not in violation of any state law or county regulation.
As a result, District Attorney Michael Doherty said he cannot file any criminal charges.
The fire, the way it had been set and their plan to extinguish it, was reasonable and responsible.
We reached out this afternoon to 12 Tribes. We're hoping to speak with someone yet today, and we'll update you if we do.
There's so much involved here, Kevin. It's hard to imagine that everyone got answers that they were looking for, but some people were satisfied by at least having a report on paper, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's one family in particular I've been in contact with for months. They just wanted to know. They didn't want somebody to go to jail. They just wanted to know what happened.
All right, Kevin, thanks. Investigators also said today that the second fire was probably caused by an Xcel power line.
Specifically, one line from one pole a third of a mile south of the 12 Tribes property. And that's where Marshall Zellinger is live this afternoon. And Marshall, we found out today that we have viewer video showing exactly what investigators were describing.
Right, but previously we aired viewer video showing an arcing power line over Highway 93 itself. That is not what investigators referenced today. However, the same viewer who sent us that video also sent us other video last year, and it happens to show what investigators were talking about, which is the lines on top of these poles. There are 3 of them, and the one on the farthest left of one of the poles right down there, there's video showing that it's not connected where it's supposed to be. This video from Edward Harrell shows him driving north on Highway 93, which is south of the 12 Tribes property. When we stop the video, you'll see a power line not attached to the top, but rather floating, which is the term we learned today. It's touching that push pole, which is the diagonal support pole. According to investigators, it caused hot aluminum particles to land on the ground and start a second fire. There's a picture from the evidence showing wiring from the center wire that was still attached and shows evidence of electrical arcing. Last year, a civil lawsuit was filed against Xcel by fire victims, hoping to make that a class action lawsuit. I asked the attorney what today's evidence does for that case, which had not yet been awarded class action lawsuit status.
I think it gave our lawsuit some steroids. You know, there was a lot of skepticism about Xcel Energy's responsibility for this. I think primarily based on their flat denials of responsibility.
We asked Xcel many specific questions and got a general statement, I should say, which included, we strongly disagree with any suggestion that Xcel Energy's power lines caused the second ignition, which according to the report started 80 to 110 feet away from Xcel Energy's power lines in an area with underground coal fire activity. Xcel Energy did not have the opportunity to review and comment on the analysis relied on by the Sheriff's Office and believes those analyses are flawed and their conclusions are incorrect. During the news conference, there were terms that I think are more legal terms than anything else that I believe it was the sheriff that said Xcel and this power line is the probable cause, but that they could not rule out the coal seams, though they were saying they are not looking at the coal seams as a possible second or third ignition point, but rather 12 tribes and this one right here, Tom and Kim.
Interesting that Xcel statement says they were not able to review the report and yet find it to be flawed. So I wonder, how those two jibe.
And there are several specific questions that we asked Xcel based on responses we got last year to me, Kevin Vaughn, and a producer, Nathan Higgins, asking questions about specifics relating to possible cause of the fire, and we were told without equivocation in all of them that there was no evidence that led Xcel to believe that they had any result of the cause of the fire. This report suggests there is possible evidence, and I'm trying to get from Xcel what they knew and when, and were we given the correct statements at the right time. I have not got a response to, are we going to get answers to the other specific questions we asked?
Well, they may not want to answer you, but who do they have to answer to? Someone does have the authority, I would presume, to make them answer these questions in specific.
The civil lawsuits we have the one civil lawsuit that I referenced in this story, and another one was filed this morning for class action status. And those are just going to start popping up out of the woodwork. And if it has to go to court, then Xcel will have to start responding. And I don't know the answer to this. I wonder if the Public Utilities Commission has any power over trying to get information on something like this.
You would think so.
No, you'll keep digging on that. And it's just so interesting because this video came to you very early on. And when you look at that video and you look at where you're standing, so many of us know that area by Highway 93. It was such a small plume of smoke initially. I mean, it was significant, but what it became.
And I should point out that video that we showed was before there was any fire. So the 12 Tribes fire was happening at that time, and then the viewer that had that video, Edward Harrell, with that wire not attached to where it was supposed to be attached, there was no fire at that time, and I believe the time frame might be 20 minutes before they believe the fire started over here.
Wow.
There is a lot to digest with this report and with more to still come. Marshall, we know you'll stay with it. Thank you. Of course, there's much to talk about. We do have an in-depth look at the first hours of the Marshall Fire, allowing you to click through a map to see what happened minute by minute while that fire spread. This will also tell you when and where the fire burned and just how fast it did move on that day. It's marshallfiremap.com. You can also find a link to it on the 9 News app.